we're going to talk briefly about the dark side of AI training. So, a new investigative report came out that kind of talked about the dark side of what happens when we're training these foundational AI models. So, a recent investigation by Time Magazine found that OpenAI used outsourced Kenyan laborers who earn less than $2 per hour to make ChatGPT less toxic. So, what that means is they had workers review and label large amounts of data of disturbing text that includes violent, sexist, racist remarks, and a whole boatload of other even worse things in order to teach the platform what constituted an unsafe bit of language output. Now, some workers unfortunately reported pretty serious mental trauma resulting from this type of work. And eventually, OpenAI and Sama, which is the outsourcing company in Kenya that was involved, suspended their relationship and stopped the work they were doing due to both the damage to workers, but also they were getting a ton of negative press around these kinds of practices. And you had published about this as well in a LinkedIn post, and it seemed to really resonate with people. It just raises larger questions about how the AI technology we're discussing, the models that are going to transform our businesses, how these are actually being trained. And you said, quote, there are people, often in faraway places, whose livelihoods depend on them exploring the darkest sides of humanity every day. Their jobs are to read, review, and watch content no one should have to see. So talk to me a bit about how does this type of outsourcing and labor impact the ethics of the AI industry as a whole?
This goes back to the point of ChatGPT was the shiny object that got everyone seemingly interested in artificial intelligence. And on the surface, it's awesome. Like, oh, this can help us do these things. It has all these unknowns about the impact on our business and our team. But at the end of the day, like, this is magical. It's crazy tech. And that might be as far as a lot of people go. And they don't go further to understand, well, what is artificial intelligence really? How does this stuff even work? What is a language model? How is it trained? And then you start to kind of slide into things like this, where the reality of the way artificial intelligence works. So this isn't new. Like that was, I put this up. I think I said I post, like I was debating even sharing it because I feel like right now we're at the level where everyone's finally paying attention to artificial intelligence and becoming curious about it. And this is going like 0 to 100. Like to take people immediately to, oh, do you know how they're trained? You're just going to get this like backlash of, oh my gosh, like I don't even want to know this stuff because you're just trying to get into a topic you've been avoiding generally for the last few years if you're a business or marketer.
Mm.
And so things like deep conversations around the ethics of AI, understanding the impact on the environment, understanding the impact on humans who have to train and label this stuff. Like those are heavy topics. And so I can see a lot of people just not wanting to have to deal with those topics right away. Not that they're not critical and important, but my general feeling is you're going to get a lot of people just like, I'm not going there right now. Like, I don't even know that. But I felt like this is a fundamentally critical topic for people to realize how AI is trained. So you have been experiencing this for like a decade or more on social media. So if you go into Facebook, there are lots of really horrible things people post all the time on Facebook. Photos, videos, stuff you don't even want to imagine humans think about or do. They put up all the time, sometimes live streaming horrible things. The only way for AI to automatically detect and remove that stuff before it spreads is for it to learn it's bad. The way it learns it's bad is a human watches it and labels it as bad. This is how social media has worked for a decade. So again, I'm not going to go into graphic detail here, but imagine like the worst things humans could possibly do, the dark web of things. Someone has to tell AI that stuff is bad. The AI does not know. It doesn't understand these things like a human does. So it has to be trained over and over and over again, constantly labeling horrific things. And then someone at Facebook, not in a faraway place, sitting off in Silicon Valley, has to look at the training sets and say, did it work? Did did it get the thing off the internet we were supposed to get off the internet? So they're sending this content to faraway places for cheap labor because it's lots of labeling, lots of horrible work that nobody really wants to do unless they have to do it. Then it comes back to the US and they then have to vet, did it work? Is the training working? And then stuff gets through. And then they have to go like, why did it get through? So there are people in faraway places and nearby, if you're in the US, who have to look at this stuff all the time. Imagine like the mental impact that has on you. Like I still have like lines from that article, things I read in that article I can't get out of my head a week later,
Mm.
just from like one line. Imagine having to actually read that stuff for 9 hours a day and say like, yep, bad, bad, bad. So this is how images are trained. It's how video is trained. It's how language is trained. And that's not going to change. So I think like when I put it up, it was just an awareness thing. Like I wanted people to start realizing there's much more to the story than shiny objects that do magical things. There is an entire history behind how this stuff has worked, and there is an impact it has on humans today, not just job loss. Like there are people who have, like, as part of your compensation package is like mental health, like seeing psychologists about the things you have to look at every day. And that is a really hard thing for people to comprehend who don't have to do this stuff all the time. So, again, I think it's not like you can put something up like this and there's some action item that we can all take. Like you're not going to like I think someone made a comment in the post about like, well, maybe I won't use ChatGPT anymore. I was like, well, then stop using social media. Like
Mm.
the
Yeah.
point of this wasn't to say this is horrific and we shouldn't do it. The point of it was to raise awareness that this is what happens, and you can't just like arbitrarily choose that OpenAI is evil because they're doing this because they all do it and they have
Yeah.
no alternative. I think that's the challenge. Should they pay them more? Absolutely. Like, should there be a greater focus on the human impact of this? 100%. But you can't just pick one of these tech companies and say, well, they're evil because they're doing that because they all do it.
So if I'm a business leader using these tools, or considering it, I mean, obviously this is a bit upstream of, the actual tool being used in the use case. Is there anything I need to be thinking about here for my own company brand usage of the technology? Or is it more just kind of educating myself on the nuts and bolts of how AI is actually working?
I think it's going to be a more advanced part of the AI roadmap and scaling the use of AI in your organization. You're probably going to quickly and need to arrive at a point of it's like, okay, we're buying this solution. What is the training data for this? How was it trained? I mean, this is probably not the right analogy, but like um, the diamond industry. Where were they mined? What are the
Mm.
conditions with which the diamonds are mined? Like, that's not that unlike this. It's like, okay, all right, I get it's a language model. Okay, they're the proprietor of the language model. It was built. How was that language model trained? What labor was used to train the model? So you could imagine publicly traded organizations in particular that have higher standards for this stuff. They're probably going to start asking those sorts of questions within their RFPs. Like,
Mm.
so I think as you look out ahead and you take a more robust approach to the integration of AI across your organization, you will likely start getting into these scenarios where you really have to understand the training data sets and then where that training came from and how it was generated and things like that. But I think it's probably early for a lot of organizations. I mean, again, you're buying an AI writing tool. Your head of content marketing or head of, lead editor or whatever is going to go and assess some tools and buy a tool. They're not going to have a
Right.
clue
Right.
how the language model learned or what human labor, provided the labeling, and they're not going to know to ask that stuff. So that's why I say it's just a more advanced topic, not any less critical topic. It's just more advanced because there's not enough people in the industry who know to even ask the right questions.